So now that we're done with Hemwick, at least for now, let's do some leveling up, and then I think next we're gonna head to the Great Forest, which is one of the largest areas of the game, and really like just packed with dangerous enemies. So what do we want to do for now in terms of stats? Do we want arcane, or do we want endurance, or do we want strength? How many points do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, that's not bad. Let's see if we can boost that a little bit further, if we have any good blood items. Yeah, we have a bunch of these. Oh, that's a lot of blood. We should actually use some of these right now and try and make the character a little bit more buff before the forest. And then just keep a couple of them in case we need emergency blood for some sort of weapon upgrade or anything later, you know?
Welcome.
So how many points does that give us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. Alright, so how about 2 strength, 2 endurance, 2 arcane, and 1 vitality? How's that? I'm gonna spend a little bit less on strength going forward because there's a soft cap on strength around 25 if I'm not mistaken. But let's also go to this altar and see if we can get some runes going. And this is the new ability we picked up in Hemwick, is the ability to inscribe Carol runes on ourselves, which is the technique that the hunters used to use to make themselves these superhuman people, basically. You know, they have, if we're talking in comic book terms, they basically have healing factors because of the yarn and blood, and then they get these different superpowers by having these runes. So if we're gonna go to the Great Forest, we should probably go to Odin Chapel, right? Can't go to Odin Chapel. Why is that? Oh right, yeah, because it's because Henrik is in Odin Chapel right now. Okay, let's actually maybe we should fight Henrik before we go to the forest. Yeah, let's do that. I wanna I wanna finish Eileen's storyline. Henrik is, you probably remember that we fought a werewolf known as Father Gascoigne earlier. And basically he had a hunting partner named Henrik, and they used to hunt together and they were great friends. And now that we killed Gascoigne, basically his friend Henrik has gone mad. And hunters that have gone mad are the specialty of Eileen the Crow. She's basically a hunter who kills other hunters who have gone bad.
Oh, hello there. Perfect timing not to go near the tomb below Erdon Chapel in the Cathedral Ward.
Yeah, so she's basically, don't go to the tomb where Gascoigne died because Henrik is down there and he's gonna kill you. So she warns you. But it turns out that Eileen, even though she's very strong, is actually an old woman by now, and if you don't help her in her battles, she is going to get killed. So we're gonna help her with Henrik. That's him down there. And he's actually pretty strong, so we're gonna be careful. Oh wow. This would be an embarrassing death right now. Feel free to close your eyes if you don't trust me. Okay, let's let him go over to Eileen and then... yeah, do that. a little bit of a cheesy strategy, but that's fine. He's not a major boss or anything. That'll do. And now she's basically going to tell us that we didn't have to help her, that she had it, but we know that's not true.
That wasn't necessary of you, but you have my thanks.
This mask that she's wearing, by the way, I know a lot of people like this sort of plague doctor aesthetic. Has become popular in, you know, in pop culture in the last couple of decades. I used to think they were really scary when I was young, and yeah, it is a cool aesthetic. It really is. In case you didn't know, these plague doctors basically were not medical professionals at all. They were, well, they were medical professionals, but they did not understand the concept of the plague very well, because back in those days you had something called the humor theory of disease, and you had the miasma theory of disease. Basically two different ancient ways of looking at the ways diseases are spread, because they obviously did not have a germ theory yet. So these doctors who didn't know anything about how the plague was actually spread would do all kinds of really horrific things to try and contain it. And it's actually a lot of inspiration, I think, is drawn between them and the Healing Church, who would walk around Yarnum in this game and kill, you know, villagers or citizens who had signs of the plague of the beast in them. And the reason they had that beak, in case you didn't know, is because miasma theory of disease is this old theory. Before we knew about germs, people used to believe that there was this thing called miasma, which is basically bad, evil air that would carry diseases between people, and that this miasma and the germs were actually contained in the foul smell of you know, foul-smelling things. So if, you know, you had human excrement, for example, that stinks, and you breathe that in, you would get the diseases in that way. So they were actually kind of close to the actual truth. But because they believed that you got infected because of bad smells, they would wear a mask with a long beak like that, and then in the end part of the beak they would put in things that smelled nice, like flowers and herbs. And so they believed that because they were through the mask constantly smelling nice smells, that was going to somehow prevent them from catching the plague. And that is the reason why they had those weird bird masks. It just ended up being a very, very cool aesthetic that sort of lasted throughout history. But I'm pretty sure that was the original purpose of the masks, as far as I know. They also had... Oh wow, that's not good at all. Is he gonna kill us? Okay, good, he didn't. Brain suckers, they're way too scary. So we're gonna tonitrus this guy. Oh yeah. These plague doctors, by the way, you know, they have these black leather outfits, and that would cover their entire bodies, which is great if you're trying to, you know, not catch a disease. If you cover your entire body in clothing like that, it's a good idea. The problem is that the way the plague actually used to spread most of the time was through fleas. You know, you probably know about plague rats, but the problem with the plague rats was that they carried fleas on them, and then the fleas would actually have the disease in their blood. And fleas, when they attack humans, they tend to jump up off of the ground and onto the legs. And because the plague doctors were wearing not pants with their, you know, whole leather outfit, they were actually wearing robes. Even though most of their body was covered, they could still have fleas crawl up their robes and onto their legs. And so many plague doctors, as far as I know, most of them actually ended up catching the plague and dying because of it in the end. So it's like they had these good theories for the time about disease, and they were very close to the truth, but ultimately it was just you know, they were just too dated in terms of their view of disease, I guess. See, I think there's some good treasure up here hidden behind a very powerful executioner, so we gotta be careful with him. He's killed me a bunch of times before. That's not... okay, that worked. Perfect for a gunshot finish. What do we have here? I think that's called Madman's Knowledge, those skulls, and they basically give you insight, which is a currency in this game. Concept of insight is very Lovecraftian, by the way. Like, as you unravel the mysteries of Yharnam, you gain more and more insight as to, you know, what's actually going on here, but moreover, it's like insight about the true nature of the world and the great ones and human beings and so on. And so it gradually drives you insane. You can use the insight as a currency to buy items, but it also changes the way your character will view the world. And that's like basically the core concept of a lot of Lovecraft's literature. Is his characters will come across some sort of, you know, what he will describe as an eldritch truth, you know, some sort of insight or some horrible truth that is so scary and so defeating in terms of its implications that it actually just drives human beings insane. And it's this idea of cosmic insignificance where you know, they basically, their characters realize that humans are unimportant and purposeless in a much grander scheme of things in the universe. And so that's, oh wow, that's a death for no reason out of nowhere. Oh well, it happens. Yeah, so I really like the concept of insight in this game. I think maybe the most famous story that deals a lot with that kind of stuff of Lovecraft that you've probably heard of is the Call of Cthulhu, if that's indeed the way it's supposed to be pronounced. Yeah, basically the story of I'm not going to spoil the Call of Cthulhu, but you probably know the basics of it. There's a priest or a sort of a prophet of an ancient, evil, sort of cosmic type of deity. And his name is Cthulhu, and he sleeps at the, like, he's the, Cthulhu himself is not one of these great gods. He's more of their prophet, or their sort of how to put it, yeah, he's kind of like a prophet of their religion in a way. And he's been asleep at the bottom of the ocean for many hundreds of years, thousands of years, waiting for the right time to emerge. And in the story of the Call of Cthulhu, he's actually starting to slowly wake up. And so people who are sensitive to like his whispers or the fact that he's coming back start going insane, and in all the shadowy corners of the world people start to dedicate cults to Cthulhu, and he's worshipped. And it's the story of this person who like tries to solve this mystery, right? So it's like a little bit like a crime novel, but then it has all of this, you know, other stuff going on in terms of like Cthulhu, who's basically an alien, and all that other stuff. It's a really cool story, and even if you haven't read the Call of Cthulhu, you would probably know about the you know, the character of Cthulhu. I think Lovecraft describes him as like he has the head of an octopus, and then he has scaly wings, and he's kind of reptilian in nature. So you've probably seen all the different interpretations of what he looks like. Just a really cool character. I'm surprised there was not like more, like I wanted there to be like a clearly like Cthulhu inspired boss in this game, that maybe you fought, you know, in around the fishing hamlet when you go out to sea or something. I think the closest thing we get in the game is Abandoned Abritus, who, you know, looks a little bit like an octopus who fell in a blender. But yeah, that's another story that you should definitely check out if you're interested in getting into Lovecraft. And like I said before, if you're not into reading, there is a lot of great stuff when it comes to Lovecraft audiobooks and stuff you can look up, even on YouTube, where people who have great voices will read this stuff too, and it's very atmospheric and very cool. So we're making our way through the first area of the Great Forest right now. I think the story of the Great Forest, if I'm remembering correctly, is basically villagers who were turning into beasts would try and escape the church and, you know, persecution in the city, and they have made this like little makeshift society for themselves out in the woods near Yarnum. That's the transformation attack of the hammer. It's actually pretty good. Oh wow. I'm feeling kind of frail. We take a lot of damage right now, even from weaker enemies. This armor I'm wearing is not the best one, but I always prefer it just because I think it looks cool. Isn't there supposed to be a shortcut somewhere around here? Oh yeah, that was it. It's going in the wrong direction though. This area is dangerous because, if you don't know, there's a guy with a cannon up there who is trying to shoot us. Let's make a run for it and try and kill him now. Okay, good enough. Is there anything we need before we move on to the second part of the forest? Blood beast pellets I never really use. I know you can use them to increase beasthood and boost damage and stuff. I never really got into like understanding deeply the concept of beasthood, but I would like to someday try and make a playthrough that uses the beast claws weapon, and then beasthood becomes a factor. So these enemies, by the way, we're getting into the second area of the forest here, and basically it's home to these weird parasitic snakes who will crawl into people's bodies and take them over. So that guy was about to transform into a snake monster. He's the first one you encounter, but I just stun locked him before he was able to transform. But yeah, it's kind of weird how they have these they're not like weird like aliens or worms or anything. They're just really snakes, but they're snakes who yeah, do this to you. And this is where the boom hammer becomes amazing, because you can use the uncharged R2 like this, almost like a projectile, and then you don't have to get close to these very, very dangerous snake guys. So I think this is where we unlock, yeah, the first shortcut, so we can get back here if we need to. Is that an item up there? I wonder where that area is. Let's not worry about it for now. I can't remember what happens if you go down to the right here. Is this actually where the forest continues? Oh yeah, it is. Okay, never mind. This is where we need to go. And this is the snake area of the woods. And the snakes are dangerous. They come in many different shapes and sizes down here, so... and they're camouflaged really well, so you gotta be careful. Okay, so we do about 80 to 90% with a single R1. Let's remember that for now. And then let's see how much we do with a normal R2. That's a good thing to do, that I like to do like in a new area, is to gauge how much damage my normal attacks are going to do. Okay, so a normal uh, transformed R2 is going to kill one of those snakes in one hit, so that's what we're going to use mainly for them. And you can see, yeah, these snakes are really well camouflaged. And they are everywhere. There are so many more than you assume, so you got to be careful. You see there are ones over here as well. Speaking of like snakes crawling in your body and stuff, maybe a weird subject of conversation, but I know everybody has like their own things that they were really scared of when they were a kid. I could basically, when I was young, watch like most horror movies that dealt with like, you know, slasher films with murderers like Michael Myers and stuff. That didn't really bother me, and I never found that stuff really scary. But one thing that the one thing that always messed me up, that always made me really scared and really made me lose my lose my shit, was when people would transform into monsters in movies, when their body would like violently change. Was some of like the most scary stuff for me. And so David Cronenberg movies, like, you know, his version of The Fly, which is actually like a really cool horror movie. Jeff Goldblum, you know, who's a great actor, a favorite of mine. That was like basically the most scary thing you could have ever showed me. It completely like messed me up for like a half a year. It was so horrible to me. I don't know what it is about me and people transforming in body horror that made me so scared. But to this day, even though I like horror movies now and I can watch basically anything, it still strikes a chord that makes me like very uncomfortable. And I remember the worst thing I've seen in more recent years as a teenager or adult that really that struck that chord and made me so uncomfortable and scared, was actually an anime, a very famous one that I'm pretty sure you've seen. It's known as Akira. And it also has a great story. Like, it's really cool. It's, you know, this bullied. It's set in like a future version of Tokyo, more or less. And this young child who's like abandoned and bullied and weak and you know, pushed around, all of a sudden starts developing psychic abilities, and so now he has superpowers, more or less. And because he's been so mistreated, and he's just a normal kid with these normal powers, he starts abusing them, and he almost immediately becomes a violent psychopath. It's such a great story and such a great concept. But I'm just gonna, spoilers if you haven't seen Akira, maybe turn off the sound for a little bit here. But something that happens near the end of that is that his psychic abilities get out of control, and he starts transforming to this huge scary ass monster baby thing that is basically taking on all kinds of material around it and fusing it into his body. So he's like half flesh, half mechanical. His one of his friends, a young girl, gets squished by his own body, and then she like merges into his flesh. And when she does, like, all of her pain and her all of her like pain, and she's so scared, you know, because she's dying, and all of those feelings also like merge into him, and he has to feel all of her like negative emotions. It's a terrific but like horrible scene that just made me really scared. And then eventually what happens is, I think his psychic powers basically collapse into a singularity, and he ends up creating like a completely new parallel universe, which is really cool, because like if you're into quantum physics and stuff, that kind of makes sense to us these days, right? But when that movie was made, that was probably a very novel concept to most people. So unless you're really freaked out by body horror like I am, maybe you should check out Akira. But in terms of like, I'm not hugely into anime anymore, but in terms of like anime feature films, the other one I would recommend off the top of my head is Paprika by Satoshi Kon was another great anime movie maker, and also has really cool concepts about the human mind and stuff, so maybe check that out. Oh shit. Yeah, so these snakes also inflict poison, right? So you gotta be careful. I don't even know if we're going the right way. This is so cool about the forest area. It's really big and it's very easy to get lost because it has many different winding paths. And it sort of almost feels like being lost in a real forest, which is why it's so awesome. He's gonna call his snake friends, right? Here's another one of the pigs, right? My favorite, probably my favorite enemies in Bloodborne. I love the pigs. They're so horrible and amazing at the same time. And they've actually have an asshole texture, so you can really see their asshole as you shove your arm through it when you visceral attack them. Yeah, but really cool. Okay. Is it this way? Let's go this way for now. That's no good. I think we've actually forgot to pick up a pretty important item a little ways back, so we're going to backtrack just a little bit here and try and pick that up. I think it's up here somewhere. Yeah, right here. This is another powerful upgrade item for our weapons, so oh, that second attack completely missed. That's horrible. I could have cleaned that so nice. Oh well, it's not gonna matter. This weapon is too good. Just do that. And you see the range on that fire is actually longer than you would suppose. But yeah, that's one of the more powerful bloodstone shards in the game. So that's I think that's actually the earliest one you can get if you don't dip into the DLC, so it's good to keep in mind. What's this area? Oh right! No, we're not going to go here yet. There's a shortcut I need to unlock first, because I want to open the shortcuts because I think there's a pretty big risk of us dying on the next boss, and then we have to run back. I don't know if we're gonna die, maybe we won't, but I just I find the Shadows of Yharnam to be one of the more difficult bosses in the game. I think the idea behind the Shadows of Yharnam is that they are actually the sort of bodyguards or retainers of the woman named Yharnam, who's an enigmatic character, a queen who we haven't really run into yet, but she's actually a very important character in the lore because it is implied that she is the mother of Murgo. I'm not going to say any more than that, because if you haven't played Bloodborne and you're just watching the playthrough, that's going to spoil a little bit too much. That's a one-hit kill on the pig. That's amazing. I love Boomhammer. But we're gonna switch to the Tonitrus for a while pretty soon. If you go in there, you see this little like lake of fireflies here. I went over to that area in my first playthrough, and it's actually the first time you run into celestial enemies. Basically, extra-dimensional beings, or maybe they're you know, aliens. And it's such a sudden shift in the aesthetic of the game, because everything has been kind of like beastly or animalistic up until that point, and then all of a sudden you run into this completely new type of enemy that becomes much more common later. But let's unlock that shortcut, and then let's use a Hunter's Rune. Go back to the Hunter's Dream, and upgrade the character one more time, and then it's time to try and confront the Shadows of Yharnam and see if we how we do against them. Like I said, they're not my specialty.